So I watched Knock Knock. I was not wanting to do this video just yet, but I did recently review it, and a thought came to mind, then another thought came to mind, and then another thought came to mind about this movie. There's layers to this movie. On the surface, I was like, it's not what I'd hoped for. But as I started really thinking about it, just as the day went on, I was like, I need to talk about this now before I forget. And I actually realized that some of my thoughts were already on paper. I got my notes right here that I took. So let's go over this. First big point was Keanu Reeves is actually the executive producer. Points for that automatically. They even made a reference to his short hair, which I like. It's like I think I'd like you better with short hair. I'm like that was kind of funny. I like that. And then the kids come in, they wish him a happy Father's Day, and it's like that cliche, the family loves each other thing, and they really milked that. And I was trying to figure out why, because Eli Roth has never been a cliche kind of guy. Either he was A, playing it safe with the genre, or B, there was something more. I went with the latter. So, kids rush in and stuff like that, and then there's talk about how they haven't had it sex in 3 years or 3 weeks rather, and she's upset, distraught about that whole thing, and she's been busy, he's been busy, whatever. So you think like nothing of it, marital issues, right? So I kept that in the back of my mind, and it comes into play later on with one of my theories. Then there was the guy that came in who seemed to be like overly friendly with the kids and with the wife, and I thought maybe there was like an affair going on with her, maybe. So I thought that might have been layered in there someplace. There was nothing to suggest that was true, except for the fact that he comes back later on, and I couldn't realize why. So again, not a whole lot of evidence to support that, but enough to think that it's possible. So far, I was not digging the characters a whole lot, because again, it was like a little cliche to me. So again, on the surface, I wasn't impressed. Slow start. There's no suspense. The obvious is obvious. Detroit Rock City plays great. I liked that a lot. And then we see the character connection becomes less as they're gone. We're starting to see Keanu Reeves by himself working on his project. He's doing graphing and all the stuff with Holmes, and he takes out a pipe and fills it with something. He goes to light it, and he doesn't. And I thought that might be what Shakespeare would call the pistol. If there's a pistol introduced in Act 1, it must be used by the final act. So, keeping that in mind, which I did, by the way, I feel like as we're 14 minutes into this, I feel like you've seen the trailer. You can skip the first 14 minutes to avoid the cliches and stuff like that. On the surface, that's what I thought, right? Because it doesn't seem like something Eli Roth would do. So, again, at a first glance, you're like, man, I can do without it. So the acting and the dialogue is impressive. A little backstory that seems meaningful to the plot, suspense on a third layer. And I thought about this, like I said, when I was writing this, it was just forethought. I can't stress that enough. I was just looking at it on the surface, nothing deep. And then Eli Roth starts to show his writing with his wife's dialogue. Suspense builds when talking about the wife's artwork. So now the two girls show up. They're stuck in the rain. Keanu Reeves, being the nice guy, Evan, let's call him Keanu Reeves. So Keanu Reeves invites him into the house, and they're sitting there and talking, and everything seems to be really cool. Like, they're like, oh, hey, we really appreciate this. We're cold. You mind if we use your dryer? Stuff like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're starting to try and get closer to him, and he's like, sure, no problem. He's got his reserves. He's let strangers into his house. Of course he would. So it continues from there. They started talking about the wife's artwork. They started talking about the kids, which, again, I didn't think anything of it at first. And then it dawned on me later on in one of my 3 theories. Suspense builds when talking about the wife's artwork. Mention of the wife's kids, family, and the two wandering, the two women and Reeves. The movie isn't self-aware, but almost like it knows you watched the trailer. That was key. They were really like angling at the fact that people had already known what was going on or what was going to happen. But was that so, or was it something else? Now we are 27 minutes into the film. It seems a little more drawn with a countdown. That he called the vehicle for them to get picked up at, and he said, and the vehicle will be here in 45 minutes. So now, in movie time, 25 minutes has passed, and just that, 14 to 27? You do the math. Anyways, one of the things that they were talking about was, like, cheating or like, human behavior, like primal nature, like we're the only ones that are monogamous, which they're wrong, by the way. But to an extent, they're right. She says we're more animals than animals. And I thought, that's a great quote. But again, started thinking a little bit more. The question of human behavior comes into play, which showed me, and it was at that exact moment when I'm like, they're not crazy. They're not psychotic. Like, this must be an Eli Roth Tarantino kind of revenge film a little bit, right? So that's what my thought was. But again, remembering the trailer, I was like, no, because he ends up doing things wrong. And they get upset and do all these things like it was a test almost, right? And I'm going to get to that here in a minute. So you see the psychotic behavior becomes more noticeable in awkward behavior. It starts leading to like like their dialogue and the sexual interactions and stuff like that. One girl like hides in the closet later on. It's really bizarre, their behavior. But the sex talks that had increased more behavioral questions of human behavior, or simply illustrating how people validate and create a mindset to defend their behavior. Like somebody saying, well, I'm this way because of daddy issues. I'm this way because of my religious background. I'm this way because, well, all people are like this, and they're just afraid to admit it. You know what I mean? It's almost like they're trying to defend themselves and validate this, and to hash it out with others on why they are the way they are and why they're right. So the fact that Keanu Reeves smoked pot was interesting, and it does come back into play. I made note of that so I wouldn't forget. Evan wakes up after having a threesome to find the kitchen thrashed. So now it was like almost like a peaceful night, it seemed like, but it got like really central real quick. You do see nudity in this film. You do see a tattoo, and I won't spoil that for you, like somebody else did for me. And so there's that stuff for guys in this film. But I did say something in my Facebook status, and I'm going to get to that here in just a little while. Eli Roth sharing today's behavior in hookups when Evan tries rushing them out the next morning. So Eli Roth, as we know, in his previous films, he talks about college kids and stuff like that. Well, what do we see a lot in colleges? We see a lot of hookups. We see a lot of one-night stands, the walk of shames. We see a lot of that in today's society, more so than we have an acceptable level. We see it a lot in film. We see it a lot in TV, which to me is very interesting that it was brought up in this film the way that it was. And I started diving real deep into that as far as layers go into this film. And at this point, he gets a call outside, and it's his wife. Now, the audience can hear the girls clear as day. The wife is like, you seem a little distracted. But she makes no sound of like, who's there? Is somebody there? Or was it to... Because the audience doesn't need to be reminded that the girls are there. The girls are there. We didn't have to hear them. We could have had camera shots to see that. But the girls could be heard. And I felt that could be deliberate on one of the layers that I'm going to get into. So keep that in mind. And then we're going to go through all these pieces and we're going to put them together. Chaos in Evan's life increases when a massage therapist arrives. She's like, hey, stop by, I want to see what you were doing, this, that, and the other. Real friendly lady, obviously knows that he's married. And then it becomes a little more hectic for him, hiding the fact that, one, he's got 2 girls in the house, 2, that he let strangers in the house, 3, that he had sex with these strangers, and so on and so forth. And now all of a sudden he's like having the regret. Now he's having the I'm gonna get caught. Now he's having all of this stuff going on in his life, all in just this one morning. And again, I think that kind of signifies that a little bit. Evan calls the cops at this point after the girls let their presence known in the house. The woman is like, "You're sick. You're a sick man. You know, I can't believe you do that. I'm not going to say anything, but you should feel ashamed of yourself." And this, that, and the other. He's like, "It's not what you think." And she goes, "Bullshit. It's not," to something to that extent, right? So the Evan calls the cops, saying the girls broke in. He invited them in. We know this. We know he invited them in. We've seen the trailer. We know he invited them in. We know he's compassionate towards them and stuff like that. So he's, again, lying. He gives the girls a ride home, and he drops them off at a house. Says it's theirs, but then they go across the street to a playground. And I thought that might have been something like, oh my God, was that like foresight? Was that like a hint towards something? Like, what the hell is going on? Turns out, if my theory is correct, well, at the end of the movie, it kind of slows that up for you. And we're going to get to that spoiler in just a little bit because of one of my theories, and because I think that it was a dud, basically. It was a blank. It was a way to throw off the audience a little bit. Like I said, this movie is more intellectual than you could ever possibly imagine. There was so much to it. It is ridiculous. So now Evan calls the cops about the break-in, gives the girls a ride to and they go to the playground. There's an insinuation made earlier that they could be underage, possibly. And is there double meaning? That got my attention. So now at this point, we're 52 minutes in, and the girls return. The audience is aware of it because of Keanu's behavior. And based on what's going on, Justin?
Hey, what's up, bro?
And Evan's obvious behavior is obvious. Like, oh my God, there's noise in the house. That kind of cliche in the movie, right? So we know what's going on. The audience doesn't need to be catered to this. We've seen the trailer, and all of this is pretty much in the trailer, minus the bits and pieces. And I think that was deliberate. Evan is knocked out as he discovers who's there. He's knocked out with one of the pieces of art. And now we see more of the psychotic madness. As Jenna, or Genesis, puts on his wife's makeup. Now, this is interesting, okay? She's putting on his wife's makeup. And that's not even the big part of it. Not actually putting on his makeup, but on the mirror across the way, she's writing, "This was all a dream." She's writing that on the mirror. And you're thinking, why write that? It has no significance. If you look at her t-shirt, it says the same thing that she wrote on the mirror. Pretty cool, right? So, getting into this a little bit more. Now we're starting to get places, guys. Evan pleads, and he's tied to the bed. Made me laugh thinking of a warped 50 Shades of Grey, right? So I got that little bit of humor out of it. But the girl, Belle, she puts on his daughter's clothes. This is interesting. Puts on his daughter's clothes, right? And it's like the schoolgirl outfit. She's even like put the freckles on, and then she gets on top of him, and she starts like, saying, "Daddy, don't you love me? Don't you love me? Remember all those times you'd like come into my room and you'd talk to me?" He's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" She's like, "Don't you remember? Don't you remember?" Which told me PTSD. Then she kind of got caught back into that. Could it be a slight case of schizophrenia? Could it be a traumatizing thing that happened in her childhood? Again, we're getting into these layers now, guys. This is getting really good. Basically making insinuation that she's his daughter, which is weird. There's nothing in the movie to be able to suggest this. And it was just kind of like a weird twist. So then there's like this like awkward interaction where they're playing like this game. So they kind of like break down, and I hated this at first. I'm like, it's that awkward, like, it's a game show, guys, like, woohoo. And I'm like, this is retarded, like, this is bad. But it really shows how the characters digressed. When we look back, they are they're soaked, and this, that, and the other, and they seem to be having a clear head, a clear mind on things. So trying to piece things together as Evan's trying to figure out what the hell is going on, calling them all these horrible names. They start telling him things. They start making him guess things for this game show they're hosting in the living room, where it's just these two literally acting like children, like they're playing a game as kids. Really bizarre behavior. And Evan gets away. I'm not going to tell you how or what happens with that, but I am going to say that he gets out of this situation, and they catch him again, and then they do all this crazy stuff around the house. This is the big spoiler alert, okay? The statue's defaced, and the guy who was in the beginning, who I believe I wrote down his name. I did not write down his name. But the guy who I thought was having the affair with the wife, or was like trying to get involved, he shows up at the house. And they started tossing the inhaler around, and he slips, falls, hits his head. You can guess what happens next. And Keanu Reeves, Evan, he reacts, of course, very upset by this because he was the one who finds Evan, and this, that, and the other. The girls took his inhaler and got him purposely worked up. Not that they were going to try and kill him. Now, again, on the surface, you're thinking, they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. I think they were just going to try and wind him and have him passed out. Now, one of the questions that's asked in the game that they play is, back when they're in the living room, is the people who play this before, do they live? How many people who played this game? One. He says none. She says, you're right. At the end of the movie, she says, you're going to die. You're a pedophile. They claimed they were underage. So it comes out that they're these young girls, and he's like, well, you guys lied to me and this, that, you guys screwed me over. You guys came into my house. I was nice to you guys, and you guys did this. So they bury him, neck up, in dirt, in the backyard. And she's like, if you confess to your family, you confess to your wife that you had sex with underage girls, we will let you go. We will let you live. Fine, I'll do it. Doesn't even hesitate. Says, fine, I'll do it. And the girls kind of like look at each other, like all baffled and shit, like, okay. Grabs the phone, calls, goes straight to voicemail. Now, this woman has her son bit or stung by a jellyfish. They're on their way home. And one of the things that they show in the same scene is they said, you stayed logged into your Facebook, you never know what happened. Well, when the girl was straddling him and she had sex with him the first time he gets away and says, you're my daddy, and then she starts smacking him. She's like, why did you do that to me? Why did you come into my room? So she went from like loving him to like hating him and like going into this like psychotic break. And he gets away, smacks her in the face, and hits her to the ground, which I'm sure doesn't put her into a better state. And and the girl, as you see, tapes it, and they posted it on his Facebook. Now he goes to like get rid of it or whatever, and I saw somebody say that he hit the like button. I didn't see him hit the like button, but I would assume that in Eli Roth's sense of humor, that would in fact happen. So let's go over this one more time. He calls, goes straight to voicemail, tells the wife what happened. And it's on Facebook, and he goes to like it. Now, I understand a phone being turned off, phone going dead for a little bit, and you're on your way home. So you're not too worried about it. But at the same time, somebody could have said something. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky on one of my theories. Theory number one is it was all a sham, that the wife actually never found out. Um, that's just one of my theories. It's very light. I know it's feathered. I have little evidence to support it, but enough to say that it is a possibility. My second theory was it was a dream. In the beginning, he goes to smoke the weed, and then he does, and the girl's like, and then the wife says, "Don't smoke all the weed." He says, "I'm not." We've seen it a couple of times in movies where an actor goes to do something, or an actor thinks something and spaces out. Barton Fink is a perfect example of this, where it could have been that he was stoned and that this had happened. It's a light theory. The ending kind of doesn't work with that, but it does in a way. As much as the art and everything else in the house is destroyed at the end, when the family walks in, the wife doesn't look pissed at all. She walks in, doesn't look angry, and the little boy says, "Daddy was having a party." Cuts to credits. That's it. Cuts to credits. So those are my two out of my three theories. My third theory, and this one is the one that holds up a lot of water. In a weird, twisted sense, but in a way that does make sense, Keanu Reeves was not the victim. The two girls were. I'm not saying he was really their dad. He passed their test, and the girl said, "You were my favorite," stuff like that, right? The girls had something happen to them to where they had this PTSD. And in my honest opinion, and with evidence, I might add, in the beginning, they seemed pretty there. You could say even medicated. They seemed cognitive and conscious about what was going on. As much as they admitted later on that they were stalking the family and seeing his behavior and testing him or whatever it was that they were doing, he later on became a victim as to why. Now there's another important thing is there was nobody else in the houses. The girl said it. There was nobody else in the houses. So it could have been 1, stage, 2, coincidence, or 3, it's just a movie. Which it is in fact just a movie, but I feel like that it was spoken several times that there was nobody in the houses. He's yelling for help, and the girl's actually seeming frustrated. She's like, "We told you there was nobody else in the houses. We looked, we checked, we went," which is really bizarre to me. But Eli Roth would not do something like that without putting something there, especially in a movie like this, which is completely out of his element. I feel like with the lack of violence, with the lack of sadism, that there has to be sadism on some sort of level. There has to be some sort of sadistic behavior. There has to be some sort of something crazy in his film. And I feel like this was just buried deeper than most. And I feel like the girls had some sort of association, possibly thought he was somebody. He could have been somebody who had done these things before to them, or resembled that, or whatever. And because he went and acted on this, sent them into a craze where they literally regressed and were children again, which makes them ultimately the victim before he was. They were victimized long beforehand, and it really, really shows in several key points. Again, with the beginning, them being cognitive, and later on when they say, with the dialogue, we're more animal than animals. And all of these things, like they seem like really aware of this, but almost to the point of where either A, they want to be proven wrong, or they are trying to give their wants, which wasn't sex. It was revenge. It was anger. It was pain. It was hurt that they'd experienced when they were younger, or something had happened. Unlike Hard Candy, and I reference this movie because in Hard Candy, the guy was in fact the victim. Turns out he'd never done these things. The girl got the wrong guy. Admit what you did, admit what you did, admit what you did. I mean, it was almost like the ending of Mystic River. You know, admit what you did and I'll let you live, or, you know, I'll take it easy on you, whatever. And he's like, yeah, fine, I did it. And then he kills the guy, and then later finds out he really didn't do it. In this, not so much. You know he cheated on his wife. He admitted to his wife on a voicemail, and he said it to them. You know, I'm married. They talked about his wife. They talked about his kids before this even happened. So it really talks about how people give in to their animalistic behaviors, their primal, but will people really do it? And again, that cheesy game show thing was a great way to show that. And honestly, at the very beginning, I gave it a very, very light 3 stars. Again, on the face surface, I'm like, it was a thriller invasion film that was done differently. And awesome acting. So, yeah, 3 stars and great soundtrack. But then I started noticing there was more to it. So I think it's one of those movies that if you watch it more, you'll start to notice things. Goes completely Barton Fink in some directions. And those of you who've seen Barton Fink, all 10 of you, you've seen Barton Fink, you'll know what I'm talking about. Those who have seen the top 10 movie fan theories, with Stanley Kubrick being directly involved with filming The Landing of the Moon. Grease, the woman was actually dead the whole time. Marcellus Wallace's soul in the briefcase. All these different theories. I mean, this is a fan theory that, because this movie was not talked about a whole lot, unlike Green Inferno, which was hyped for years, this one was not. This one literally came out of the sky. Some people might have heard it. I know I didn't hear about it. I know people who did. And I feel like that this had so much weight to it. Even when this movie came out, the one of the interviews that I got, and I read some of the interviews, they didn't go quite into depth as much as I thought that they would for the film. So I feel like I'm on the right track as far as the fan theory. Maybe I'm reading too much into this movie, or simply I can't accept the fact that Eli Roth would do a bullshit movie with Keanu Reeves and his wife. And other people would argue this, though. Other people would argue this, that they got a big Keanu Reeves guy to play in a movie like this where you could see Eli Roth's wife naked and using Keanu Reeves as a stepping stone. I can already foresee people saying that. I can foresee a lot of the people who were disappointed by Green Inferno making a backlash at this. As much as I love Green Inferno, and I kind of liked the movie The Stranger, which wasn't necessarily Eli Roth completely on his own, I feel like this movie, on the surface, is meh, but once you start noticing things, you can watch it over and over again. You do learn things that are new. It really looks at things that Eli Roth dislikes. Instead of just ripping it apart with gore, he rips it apart with his mind. And he writes this. And in his girl's lines, again, we're more animals than animals. All these other things that they talk about when they're playing that game. It's a movie that is so in depth. It goes into psychology. It goes into what the hell is going on. Some people who can't handle it will turn it off. I watched it all the way through. I was a little amazed that a movie like this could be done like that. Especially when people are like, well, it puts 50 Shades of Grey to shame. And it does, because 50 Shades of Grey had no layer to it like that. It was literally a fan novel that was written for Twilight fans. It was inspired by Twilight, and there's nothing logical in Twilight. There is nothing you'll get of substance out of Twilight. Believe me, people have tried and failed miserably. This movie, on the other hand, has more depth than 50 Shades. As a matter of fact, I think it's darker on that level and not so much on the sensual level. With 50 Shades, it was this guy who was in complete control of this girl. Now it's these two girls that are in complete control of this guy because of the things that he did wrong. And you start to see him going into a psychotic break as well, which made me believe that as he's going psychotic and they've lost their minds, could this all be in his head? Again, when she writes on the mirror, it was all a dream. So, this is not only my review, but this is a fan theory of Knock Knock. I apologize for all the interruptions. I could not wait for this. I hope I was clear. I apologize for the poor lighting. You guys have been amazing. I see that I got 5 views on my video from yesterday. Woohoo, 5 views. I mean, keep sharing my video, guys. This one, again, a little lengthier than I wanted it to. Still a half hour. God damn it. But I couldn't help it. I really had to go into this. Thank you guys again so much. Keep following me on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. Let me know what you guys think on Knock Knock. Again, watch it on demand or go to a select theater. It's not widely out there, and we're going to get into that a little bit more later this week on my upcoming video, which is going to be a lot of fun, and it might be just as long, hopefully not, and I do apologize again for the length. Have a good day, guys. Again, Mount Swordfish on Twitter. I am Swordfish on Facebook, facebook.com/I am Swordfish, and Mount Swordfish on YouTube, Swordfish Graves. Thanks, guys.